In February, we got a new owner. And the owner is the new Minister of Development, Mr. Åsmund Aukrust. Please welcome him to the stage. And I forgot to mention, so you're sitting in the sun. There's sun cream lotion out there. And so please just go to the back and grab it, because we don't want to run the risk of having burnt you guys and to be liable in any way. So welcome.
Thank you. And you definitely choose the best day and the best place to have this conference. So I'm very, very pleased to be here on so far the best day in the spring of Norway.
Thank you. I think it's fair to say that the timing of your taking on the helm as the Minister of Development was not ideal, in the sense that it's been a pretty challenging period. And in terms of the retrenchment of the US from the global scene, and where you see multilateral cooperation being more difficult.
Absolutely.
How do you see the situation? What's your approach?
Well,
how do you discuss it with your colleagues?
Good question. It's actually 100 days since I took this job, exactly on this day. But in some way, it feels a bit much longer, because there has been so many changes in the world the past 3 months. The war and conflicts has been worse, both here in Europe and in Ukraine, in the Middle East, in Sudan, and in so many other places. We have a lack of trust among the biggest country in the world. Now we also have the trade war. And on top of this, we have had the dramatic cuts, or in the beginning, the freeze of American development assistance. And it's not only from the US, we also seen it from many of our European partners, from UK, from Sweden, from Netherlands, from many others. And I also think it's an important point that you made, because I mean, one thing is the funding, but also the human capacity that has been in USAID. Many of the best experts on development, on trade, has been working in the USAID, both in DC but also on the ground. And they are not longer allowed to go to work. So I mean, there is a total new landscape that we are in. But I'm thinking that my job is not to comment on the changes. It's not to wish for another world. It's like you said in your opening remarks, it's to make a difference. It's to respond to the world that we actually are facing. So what can Norway do here? What is our possibility to make a difference? Well, I think one of the most important one is, of course, to have discussions like this. With so much uncertainty in the world, it's important that we meet across countries, across types of works, politicians, NGOs, businesses, scientists, others, to discuss those changes that we are facing. Norway will also stay as a reliable partner. We have as our goal in our budget from our government to have at least 1% in development assistance, which we are continuing on also today when we are renewing our budget. But of course, development assistance is a small but extremely important part of the development agenda.
And if I may,
yeah, absolutely.
1%.
Yeah.
We're happy to see that it's being maintained. But are you changing priorities? Are you changing the way you do it, given the fact that so much is changing?
We have done some changes, but I think we need to have this discussion where we should do more changes in our priorities. But of course, this is in the middle of the year, and I think it's important for our partners that we are reliable for this year. But I think, I mean, with so many changes internationally, we'll also have to have a very honest discussion about, I mean, how do we use our development budget. But of course, the most important response for the development agenda is private investment. That has been the truth for a long time, but now it's more true than ever before. And no one will fill the gap from the lack of the US leadership. They have been 1/3 of the international development assistance. No, we don't know where they will end, but we know that things will not be as before. So we need more private investment. Of course, we cannot decide over private companies. They are deciding themselves. But we encourage Norwegian companies to dare more, to be more active. Tomorrow we have a meeting in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to discuss with Norwegian businesses how they see things and if there are things that we can do together. But as you said, Norfund is, I mean, that's our main instrument from the Norwegian side. And I mean, when we really get this to work, we can have a combination of private investment that could create jobs, which also could create tax income. And I think it's a very good picture, as you said. 75, your investments are creating tax incomes equal to 75% of the total development budget from Norway. So, I mean, we have many things to discuss because private investment together with domestic resource mobilization will be the key for the development agenda in the year to come.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate that you still believe in the investing and in Norfund, and
Absolutely.
that 75 that includes the total also Ukraine, right? So
Yeah.
just take Africa and Asia.
Yeah, exactly.
More or less the same. On a different note, you just came back from Kenya, and you also a few weeks back you visited one of our companies, Miniplast, in Ghana. What were your impressions from meeting those companies and entrepreneurs out in the field?
They were very good, of course, and it's very good to meet Norfund on the ground. When I'm on travel, I always try to meet private businesses. Also, I mean, both Norfund, but also others, and to ask, I mean, how is it to be active here, and what can be the learning from the experience that you have had. In Ghana, we got the possibility to visit something called Microplast, which I mean, which was extremely inspiring. They were a part of solving the environmental crisis with recycling of plastic. They had created, I think it was more than 700 jobs. And they had a very clear gender perspective on the job. So, I mean, it was really inspiring. What I've seen both in Ghana and in Kenya and in the region is that, of course, there are risks when you are investing in Africa. But our experience was that this risk was possible to overcome. And I think those stories are extremely important. So, I mean, we need role models. And here I think Norfund plays an extremely important job to also, I mean, tell your stories and tell your experience to get others also to dare more, because we need private businesses in Norway and internationally that are more active when it comes to the issue of development and have also development on their agenda. And I think also, of course, this will benefit themselves. In 75 years, 40% of the world population will live in Africa. So, I mean, this is also a big opportunity for Norwegian businesses. And here I think Norfund's stories and all your expertise on this is extremely important, not only for you, but also for others.
Great. Thank you. We'll then also get the chance to meet some of the entrepreneurs. I'm happy to welcome Reyburn Hendricks, founder and CEO of H1 Capital, to the stage, and also Runa to the stage. So please join me. Join us. So Runa is a leading figure in the private equity industry in Africa. She's a founder and managing partner of one of the leading funds, DPI, where Norfund also is an investor. And I mean, there's challenges for everyone to navigate in, and there's lots of noise around. And we spoke about the geopolitical upheaval. But I gather we also had a conversation yesterday that you're a little more nuanced as to your view on the situation. So please, a quick reflection, but make it sharp. Yeah?
Sure. So as investors in Africa, for me, 25 years, we are used to volatility, problems, all sorts of things. The financial crisis, 2009, bottom of the commodity cycle, 2016, COVID, and then huge high inflation over the last few years. But Africa came into what's happening now with tariffs, actually starting last year, low inflation, other than Egypt and Nigeria, and really better macro. So what's happened? Compared to the past, not much. Our companies, our exits, our fundraising, as well as our investments, are actually doing very well. We're not seeing a difference. Why? Because Africa is one of the most delinked nations to U.S. trade. On average, Africa's exports, 6% are with the U.S., and half of that is exempt because it's energy and fertilizer. So very much delinked. In fact, this year, 6 of Africa's largest stock exchanges went up. Several of the currencies, Morocco, Francophone Africa, appreciated against the dollar. So we are actually doing quite well, and unpredictability in the future, we have to watch all of that. But for the moment, everything is doing well.
Okay, I'm glad to hear. So are you actually seeing, that the global turmoil might also represent some kind of an opportunity for Africa? Is that what you are indirectly alluding to?
It's an opportunity for it to invest for sure. It remains to be seen how we do versus the rest of developed countries and EM, but for sure, when the dollar goes down, funds flow to EM. And in our markets, the number of companies that need funding there's so many of them. So the investment side, yes, it's an opportunity. Now you have to pick what you invest in, defensive companies, certain regions, certain industries, but I do see this as certainly an opportunity or maybe just a continued opportunity and nothing's changed for the downside.
Okay, so particularly an opportunity to invest.
Yes,
okay.
100%.
And I also gather you have fundraising, and is it possible to attract funding for Africa from commercial investors these days? Or is it only people like me and DFIs like Norfund? Yeah?
So I will say, and shout out to the DFIs, including Norfund, because our industry, we're the only private investment industry created by DFIs globally. There would be none of this, and all the opportunities we talk about, job creation, climate change, which is part of what our fund does, would not happen without Norfund and the DFIs. However, part of what we were told in 1999 when I started investing is the demonstration effect. Invest, make money, get returns, obviously do impact work and ESG, but that making money, the returns, is what 300 trillion of private sector money in the world. We want some of that for Africa, and yes, it's happening. The majority of our investors are now private sector. They're pension funds, Europe, US, Africa itself. The pension fund industry is growing. We played a big role in it. They're now allowed to invest in private equity and venture capital. They do. And then Middle East and starting in Asia. So pension funds, sovereign funds, family offices, endowments, fund of funds. All the classic private capital is now coming into Africa now that we can give returns.
Great, thank you. And we're also seeing that an increasing amount of funding is coming from the Middle East, from India, from South sources, and not just from the US or Europe.
Yes.
Turning to you, Reyburn. Reyburn has built a large renewable energy company in South Africa, and where he's seen a massive opportunity. First, quickly, the US is really, bashing up South Africa these days. Can you quickly explain why? What's happening? Why South Africa?
I think there might be some political reasons around it. I think prior to the most recent elections, the ANC government has been very critical of, been very supportive of the Palestinian cause and had taken quite a bold move of taking Israel to the International Court of Justice. So I think there's a bit of that to it. And I think that's part of the narrative there. What I'd have found is that the news flow has been very confusing for me and noisy, as per the title, because there's been a lot of criticism around the BEE localization policies in South Africa. And what's confusing is that...
Sorry, if I may, just BEE is Black Economic Empowerment. Maybe quickly explain that, because we're not into all the abbreviations.
It's the favoring of black peoples in South Africa in terms of economic opportunities by procurement, hiring, investment opportunities. So that's what that is. And really the reason why it's there, South Africa is the most unequal society in the world, the highest Gini coefficient. If you're female, black, rural, you're experiencing the sharpest ends of it. That's part of the reason for it. Obviously, you can always debate policy, the way it's implemented and so forth, but that's the reason for it. And I'll be quick and just end it. I mean, so that's the reason for like the policies. I mean, my personal experience as a business person, I would not have had the opportunities if not for these kind of policies. And there's no kind of free hand out around it. I mean, my parents had to work hard to get me through school and university. I had to work very hard. I had to take risks and so forth. And I think the general narrative out there that in South Africa, the wealthiest section of our society, that they're being systematically prejudiced, it does not fit with the facts. So that's the noise. And I think for Norfund and Norfund's stakeholders who are active in South Africa, you're really going to have to look at the facts and come to your own conclusions around these points.
Thank you. So right now you're instead of facing a double whammy, because South Africa is out of favour among some, and some powerful, and you're also out of favour in terms of sector, because right now green is not seen as good, and you're investing in renewables in South Africa. So how is it going? How are you coping?
It's been really good up so far. I think hopefully our portfolio investments are beating that Norfund average like return there. I think they are. But I think at face value, you can say there's not big effects in terms of the USA withdrawing from the South African market, because they're not a big funder of renewables in South Africa, and they're not a big supplier of capital equipment. The big concern is that there are always second-order effects, which I think, Tellef, you mentioned, if risk appetite or if like investor risk goes up, materially there will be a second-order effect upon how like the projects that we're invested are do in South Africa. So I think that always is something we have to watch out for, and our funding partners need to watch out for. That being said, the underlying fundamentals of like renewables is very strong in South Africa, in terms of both from a decarbonization perspective, but also our where we've reached grid parity, and it actually makes economic sense for companies and for governments to procure power from an economic perspective. So I think that's not going to change in the very short term.
Okay. And in quick terms, what's the biggest difference between the South African renewable market and the rest of sub-Saharan Africa?
I think from my experience, because we have tried to play in some other areas, the big is that our capital markets in South Africa are like more mature. The local debt markets can support the funding of those projects in the country. I don't think that's the case in the other jurisdictions. So if Norfund were to play in any other areas, I would think about some of those institutional pieces there. In South Africa, equity capital is still quite scarce, and particularly for companies like ourselves, the BEE companies who have not historically had access to balance sheet and so forth. So that is where Norfund tends to focus in South Africa, and that is exactly where they're playing a highly like additional piece of that market. But that's what I think. We've got very developed foreign exchange markets, capital markets, and versus the rest of Africa.
Thank you. And last question for you, Runa. I mean, some people, particularly in the US, might think of Africa as one country, but obviously it's 54 countries and very big regional differences. Mm-hmm. Can you quickly just sort of, you operate in north and east, west, south. Quickly, how do you maneuver? How are you able to cover the whole continent, and how does that play out for you?
Well, there are two big trends that we invest in. The first is, as the minister said, huge population, 700 million people coming into the workforce, biggest urbanization in the world. In a few years from now, 13 out of the biggest 20 cities will be in Africa. What that does is urban people consume more, and there's a growth of population. And next year, Africa is supposed to be the fastest growing region in the world, surpassing Asia. What does that mean? There's a consumer class, huge number of people, which is one of the reasons China is also in Africa. So we invest in companies that benefit from the African consumer. The second big trend is that starting in 1999 with NAPAD, the African countries themselves got together and made company movement across borders very easily. So what does that mean? 70 to 80% of our portfolio, certainly by the time we invest, is multi-country. So we are able to grow these big African champions, what's called, McKinsey calls the African Lions. And so because we have regional teams, we can take a company from Nigeria and take it all the way into Francophone Africa or East Africa. We can take a South African company and grow it, as you call it, north of the Maputo. So we create these regional companies, and our strength is the fact that actually Africa is more integrated than most continents, and companies can grow. So that's really how we manage it. Two big trends that we invest in.
Okay, good, thanks. So, Minister, hearing these reflections and being on the ground, any thoughts from your side? Yeah?
Well, it's very inspiring to listening to you and how you are working. And I mean, as you said, Africa is a big continent, and I think it's extremely important to have more knowledge about this. So I think it's very important that you continue to tell your stories and also to tell it to businesses. I remember, I think it was 2 years ago, Jens Stoltenberg, he was at that time Secretary General of NATO, and he went to NHO's annual conference, and he said that businesses should be interested in security because there is a close link between security and business. I would add to that that all Norwegian businesses should also be interested in development, because development and security is so closely interlinked. I mean, if Norwegian businesses should have goods to sell, they need also to be a part of the solution for development and security all over the world, not only in Europe, because as we have been talking about, the biggest market will be in developing countries. So I think that Norwegian businesses should really step up and take a strong responsibility. Also when it comes to developments, and we should also hold our partners accountable. I met with the Minister of Finance in Ethiopia, and he asked, I mean, what can we do to get more private businesses from Norway and other countries? And I said, I mean, the most important thing is that you end the wars in Ethiopia, and no one will invest there, or at least it will be much more difficult to invest when there is a danger for war. And of course, we need to fight corruption. And I mean, that are the leaders that are accountable for this. But I think it's also an important message from our side and from businesses. So I mean, there are high risk, or at least there are risks in investing in developing countries. I think the risks are very often overrated, as I've also been discussing with you. So I think it's important that these stories are told.
Appreciated, and I do indeed agree. Today we will also go through some of the risks. We will go through some case studies. We will also take you through a couple of cases where we've failed and where there were various elements related to the investments that we probably should have seen. Because we will not in any way say it's all easy, but there are huge opportunities, and we appreciate that these entrepreneurs are really capitalizing on the opportunities and bringing in funding from our side. So on that basis, thank you, and I'd like to introduce our Master of Ceremonies, Anne, but thank you very much.